You ever watch a millennial, a Gen Xer, and a Xennial react to the exact same thing and wonder if they're living on the same planet? Same meeting, same news story, same moment. Three completely different responses. One goes, "We need to unpack how this makes people feel." Another just says, "Cool, I'll deal with it." And the one in the middle is sitting there going, "Okay, let me translate for both of you before this gets weird." It's easy to write this off as stereotypes, but psychologically there's actually a lot going on here. The era that raised you literally shaped your brain. The economy you grew up in, the tech you had access to, how your parents handled things, what the culture was afraid of, all of it left marks on your nervous system that you're still carrying around. So today we're getting into 5 real psychological differences between these 3 groups. Not to say who's better or worse, just to understand what's actually driving the friction, and honestly, the misunderstanding between them. Once you start seeing these patterns, you genuinely can't unsee them. Let's get into it. 1. When technology hit your brain matters more than you think. Millennials didn't just learn the internet. They grew up while it was exploding around them. Their adolescence, which is basically the most identity-shaping window of your entire life, happened alongside social media and texting and Google becoming a verb. Their sense of self literally formed in partial public view. Think about what that does to a developing brain. When you're 15 and you can post something and get instant feedback from 200 people, your relationship with being seen gets baked in at a really deep level. Digital space doesn't feel separate from real space. It just is space. Gen X had a totally different experience. Their core identity locked in before any of that existed, before smartphones, before your worst moment could live online forever. Privacy wasn't something you toggled in settings. It was just how life worked. So for a lot of Gen Xers, public exposure feels more optional, sometimes even intrusive. Like, why would I put that out there? And then Xennials. These are the analog childhood, digital adulthood people. They remember dial-up sounds and passing notes in class, but they adapted to tech early enough to actually feel comfortable with it. Their brains got wired for both worlds, which is kind of a weird superpower when you think about it. They can unplug more easily than millennials, but they navigate digital stuff way more naturally than most older Gen Xers. This isn't about who's better with technology. That's the wrong question entirely. It's about when your brain encoded social feedback loops. And that timing changes everything. If this is already making you think about your coworkers or your siblings differently, good, that's the point. If you're new here, subscribe and stick around. And if you're already part of the community, make sure notifications are on, because what's coming next builds on all of this, okay? Let's go deeper. 2. How you feel about authority is basically inherited trauma. Gen X grew up during peak cultural skepticism, divorce rates climbing, corporate scandals everywhere, political trust cratering. A huge chunk of them were latchkey kids, home alone after school, figuring things out because nobody else was going to do it for them. Independence wasn't some personality trait they chose. It was survival. And that rewires a brain. When you learn early that you need to handle things yourself, you build this strong internal authority. You don't sit around waiting for institutions to come save you. You don't assume the system is stable. You just handle it. Millennials got a different programming, more structured parenting, more feedback, more guidance. The message was, go to college, follow the path, express yourself, find your passion. There was this underlying promise that if you did everything right, the system would work for you. Then a ton of them graduated straight into economic chaos. Psychologically, that creates a very specific kind of tension. You were taught to trust the playbook, and then the playbook burned. That's why so many millennials swing between genuine idealism and deep frustration, sometimes in the same conversation. It's not entitlement, which is what older generations love to call it. It's cognitive dissonance. There's a real difference and it matters. Xennials land in the middle. Again, independent enough to figure things out solo, structured enough to see the value in working with people. They tend to get both perspectives because they absorbed both messages during their formative years. Your trust style didn't come from nowhere. It's historically conditioned, whether you realize it or not.
3. Work means fundamentally different things depending on when you were born. For a lot of Gen Xers, work is stability. You show up, You build competence, you handle your responsibilities. You don't necessarily expect your 9 to 5 to be some deep spiritual experience. It's a job. You do it well and you go home. Millennials got raised on do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, which, honestly, might be one of the most psychologically damaging pieces of advice an entire generation received. Because suddenly work wasn't just income. It was identity, passion, meaning, self-expression. And here's what happens when your career gets tangled up with your sense of self. Burnout hits completely differently. A bad job isn't just annoying or inconvenient. It feels like you're out of alignment with who you fundamentally are. That's a much heavier weight to carry than just, I don't love my job. That's why millennials are the ones talking openly about purpose and boundaries and mental health at work. Their brain literally encoded work as personal. Gen X encoded it as practical. Neither is wrong, but they're operating from very different starting points. Xennials straddle the line like they always do. They get the need for stability, but they also can't help questioning whether there should be more meaning in it. They're often the ones quietly reskilling, pivoting careers, adapting, without making some big announcement about it, just adjusting. And here's a neuroscience piece that I think is wild. When your identity and your job overlap significantly, criticism at work activates self-referential brain networks. Like the same areas that process who you are. It feels personal because in your brain's wiring, it literally is personal. That's not being oversensitive. That's architecture. Before we get to number 4, if you're seeing yourself in any of this, you're definitely not alone. That's why I make these. Drop a comment telling me which generation you connect with most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. The next topic ties directly into everything we're talking about today. All right, keep going. 4. You were literally trained to communicate differently. Gen X tends to value brevity. Get to the point. A little sarcasm goes a long way as emotional shorthand. Feelings are real, but they don't always need to be publicly workshopped. Millennials grew up as emotional language went mainstream. Therapy speak entered everyday conversation. Vulnerability got rebranded as courage. Processing out loud became not just acceptable, but kind of expected. So you end up with these wildly different comfort levels around emotional exposure, and neither side fully gets why the other one is the way they are. A short, efficient text from a Gen Xer, sounds good, can feel dismissive or cold to a millennial who's used to more warmth. A long, emotionally detailed message from a millennial can feel like a lot to a Gen Xer who's thinking, why are we having a feeling seminar about lunch plans? Neither is wrong. They were just trained in different emotional languages. It's like getting frustrated that someone speaks French when you speak Portuguese. There's overlap, but the grammar is different. Xennials, and at this point you probably see the pattern, can usually do both. Concise when the situation calls for it. Emotionally articulate when that's what's needed. That flexibility isn't random. It comes from developmental timing. They caught both eras. When you actually understand this, generational friction starts dissolving. It stops being, why are they so much? Or why are they so cold? And starts being, oh, that's the era talking. Got it. Which is honestly such a relief. 5. Resilience looks different, and that's where a lot of judgment lives. Gen X built resilience through containment. You deal with it, you adapt. You don't turn your struggle into a public event. And I want to be clear, that doesn't mean they don't feel deeply. They absolutely do. They just learn to metabolize stress privately, internally, without an audience. Millennials came up during the rise of mental health awareness. Processing out loud got normalized. Sharing your struggles became part of collective healing. Talking about hard things openly wasn't weakness, it was the point. So one generation looks at strength and sees quiet endurance. The other looks at strength and sees honest expression. You can see how those two definitions crash into each other constantly. Xennials blend both. They can white-knuckle through something silently, but they also recognize there's real value in talking about it. They've got one foot in each world. Here's the reframe that actually matters. Every generation built coping mechanisms that solved the specific problems of its time. That's it. That's what happened. Gen X skepticism? It protected them from unreliable systems. Made sense. Millennial transparency? It built community in a world that was getting more hyper-connected and isolated at the same time. Also made sense. Xennial flexibility? It let them translate between two very different eras. Necessary. These aren't personality flaws. They're adaptations. And honestly, pretty effective ones given the circumstances. So instead of ranking generations, which the internet absolutely loves to do and which is almost always pointless, what if we just recognize them as complementary nervous systems, different wiring shaped by different cultural weather? If you're Gen X, your independence probably isn't emotional distance. It's calibrated resilience born from learning early that you were the only reliable thing in the room. If you're a millennial, your need for meaning isn't naive or entitled. It's a direct response to being told you could build a different kind of world and then watching the floor shift beneath you. If you're Xennial, your in-between identity isn't confusion. It's bridge building. And bridges hold more weight than people give them credit for, quietly. If any of this helped you understand yourself or someone in your life a little better, let me know. Like the video, subscribe, tell me in the comments what hit home. I actually read those conversations and they matter more than the algorithm stuff, honestly. Next time we're getting into the psychology of people who don't post their photos on social media. That one digs into privacy, validation, identity, and digital self-worth in a way that might completely change how you interpret someone's silence online. Connects directly to what we talked about today. Different generations, different wiring, same human need underneath all of it to be understood. I'll see you in the next one.